Okay, distinguished delegates, colleagues from automotive industry, eminent speakers, fellow IKTians, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. I am Sonia Nain and I'll be your host for the webinar. I am privileged to welcome you all for the webinar on automotive functional safety and security, opportunities and challenges, being organized by ICAT under Intelligent Transportation Systems, a board of Aspire, Automotive Solution Portal for Industry Research and Education in association with SAE India and supporting partners LDRA and NSYS. This webinar is an initiative by ICAT and Aspire for industry, startups, and academia, which is a part of celebration of Azadi Ka Amrut Mahotsav, which is 75th anniversary of our independence, and aiming to reinforce the Atmanirbhar Bharat in technology area. The automotive industry is undergoing a disruptive transformation where electronics and softwares plays a key role. This transformation also brings in challenges on safety, security, liability, skills, and regulatory aspects. To address these concerns, new standards and methodologies for product certifications are being developed globally. This interactive session will discuss how the industry can utilize these emerging business opportunities and address the challenges related with it. Moving forward, I would now like to invite Ms. Pamela Tikku, Senior General Manager and Chief Business Officer, ICAT Center 1, for welcome address and a brief introduction about Aspire. We welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you so much for starting this important webinar. Dear distinguished speakers, Mr. Shinto Joseph, Mr. Raghavendra, Mr. Deepu Chandran, guests who have joined, Mr. Anup Kakkar from SAE Northern India section, friends from automotive industry. I would like to welcome you all. A very good morning and welcome you all to this webinar on automotive cyber security and functional opportunity and challenges. Being organized by ICAT with the support of LDRA and NSYS in association with our partner SAE Northern India section. As you all are aware, ICAT was set up in 2006 under NATRIP as one of the automotive testing and certification facility in the northern hub of India. And the prime objective of these centers which have been set up under the aegis of NATRIP is to provide not only certification services to the industry, but also to provide development, validation and certification and product development facilities. ICAT has been the first center under NATRIP to become functional, and we are now, all our facilities are working and functioning for last 5-6 years, and we have been getting into all areas of automotive domain. Other centers which are under NATRIP are slowly gearing up. So, you know, one is creating an infrastructure, another is creating a skill sets. So government has created an infrastructure, but skill sets and know-how takes time to develop, and I think the other centers are gearing up for that in that direction. While ICAT has taken quite big steps in trying to bridge gaps in our know-how and skill set, but there are still areas of expertise where we are lacking, and we seek support from experts in these domain areas to help us develop those gaps, to fill up those gaps. Our supporting partner for this webinar are LDRA and NSYS, who are leading organizations who are providing services related to automotive cybersecurity and functional safety. This particular topic was addressed to us in one of our meetings with during our customer visit program. At that point of time, it was maybe 6 years back. The whole concept was not very clear. I mean, we were not aware that there is going to be a software certification, functionality also, which is very important. But having over the period of these years, and also when we organized the first seminar on this topic, a lot of things were, brought on table as to what is the criticality of this particular functionality, what is the criticality of functional safety in automotive domain. And we have also tried to develop and disseminate this knowledge of the importance of this particular subject through training programs, through webinars. I have been myself attending WP29 meetings, and there, with the advent of automation in the vehicles, wherein we are talking of autonomous vehicles, where we are talking of connected vehicles, shared mobility, this particular function has gained a lot of importance. Not only that, I think there is a lot of software-driven functionalities which are built in automobiles now. For example, if people want to go from high power mode to low fuel efficiency mode, you have those options available, or you want to go from high fuel efficiency mode to low power mode, there are these functionalities available. So these things are being deliberated as to, how do we secure a system of a vehicle so that it is not under threat by external agencies? How will we build in systems and security levels at different levels of automobiles? Because once a vehicle is on road, if it is being driven by softwares, if it is being guided by softwares, how can we protect the vehicle intrusion from external agencies? And it's a big topic. So there are talks going on as to how will the industry, automotive industry, share their algorithms, and how will those algorithms be verified, vetted, validated. So big topic, not only for India but a global perspective. And I think India has not even taken the first step in this direction to understand what are the criticalities of this particular domain in the automotive parlance. And we need to build up enough know-how, we need to create facilities, we need to create infrastructure, we need to create knowledge base as to how we will help vehicles which are going to be connected, which are going to be not fully autonomous, maybe semi-autonomous in Indian parlance, shared wherever the information is shared, and how the manufacturing and validation processes be ensured. How will it be certified? How will people know how to address these issues? So these are the gaps which I'm sure uh, no, we cannot address in a day's half a day's webinar, but we need to. My take on this table is that if we can build up some kind of a roadmap as to how we can bridge these gaps, how we can have specific modules under which we can train specific set of people. ICAT through Aspire can enable that we can have targeted certificate courses. So if with LDRA and ANSYS, we create some certificate courses through which we can impart training, and we issue those certificates, and that gives them some kind of level of expertise through which they can work in industry. Although I have talked about ICAT, I'm also supposed to touch upon Aspire. I guess this whole event is also being undertaken under one of the Aspire sub boards, and I'm sure Aspire is not new to all of you. Aspire is an initiative under Government of India, Department of Heavy Industry, under Atmanirbhar Bharat, wherein 6 different technology portals are being developed. The whole initiative of these portals is to develop a ecosystem for innovation, for research, for development, for enabling India to be self-reliant. I mean, that's the larger objective. But everybody knows that this large objective cannot be attained overnight. We need to take certain guiding steps to create a foundation, so that this whatever initiative either we as ICAT or government, or for that matter industry, is taking is robust and it is sustainable. We need to make India self-reliant. That we should all as Indians, strive. Our dependence on import, whether it is for components, material, skills, or for that matter, very small items which can easily be manufactured or developed in India. We should identify those areas, how we can, grow up our industry, how we can build up our self-reliance, how we can train people to get, um, you know, why is Israel so, successful? I mean, it's a very small country. It's a strip of land, basically, not bigger than, I think, Delhi. But yet they have excellences in core areas, and why have they excelled and we have not excelled? So we need to ponder as Indians as to how we can enable the large objective of self-reliance, of Atmanirbhar Bharat, or India industry independence. I can say that. So that is what we should try to achieve, and I'm sure today's deliberations will provide a base step on a larger objective that we need to achieve. My request to the speakers and panelists today is, please look into this area as to what steps can we do in this direction in the area of automotive functional safety and security. With this, I thank you all. I welcome you on behalf of ICAT to be with us today, to speak, to share your experiences and know-how. Thank you, Sonia, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I would like to invite Mr. Anup Kakkad, Executive Director, SA India Northern Section, for a brief introduction about SA India. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you, Sonia. Namaskar and a very good morning to one and all. It's my great pleasure to welcome you and thank you for supporting this conference, which has been organized by ICAT in association with SAE Northern India Section under the mentorship of our Chairman, Mr. Tyagi, Director ICAT, Madam Pamela, CBO ICAT, and Mr. Madhusudan Joshi, Vice Chairman, Seminars and Conferences for SAE. SAE Northern India Section is a 20-plus-year-old member-driven technical society registered under the Societies Registration Act. It is one of the 4 sections of SAE India, which is affiliated to SAE International. With a vision to continuously enrich the knowledge base of practitioners like you in mobility industry, thereby increasing value for our members, is our motto, our goal, our mission. This conference is just one small step in achieving the mission. 1 second. Sorry, I had muted my phone. Okay. This conference is just one small step in achieving the mission of SAE and IS. As the theme suggests, we will expect critical challenges in whatever we take up as an activity. But I've always seen this as an opportunity for realizing my mission. For financial year 21-22, SANIS has envisaged more challenges in terms of some unique formats and events and new mega events to achieve higher reach and involvement of the SAE community by way of participation. Some of the major ones are the first virtual autonomous challenge competition, and this is in India, first one, for students with a unique format of hands-on technology experience, technology display, and knowledge sharing. We also are organizing the first 4-day virtual vehicle handling conference, where industry will have the opportunity to demonstrate the technologies on ICAT test track. 4th Thermal Management Conference and 4th Summer School on Automotive Technologies. A major event is ITEC 2021, which is a MOU between SAE India and IEEE, and there's a conference being organized in December with the theme E-Mobility for Atmanirbhar Bharat. We also have events and competitions for school students of class 5 and 6 and engineering students. Plus, we provide technical lectures and colleges. So in all our endeavors, you all have been a very strong partner and have supported us both by providing experts on various subjects in mobility value chain, volunteers for judging competitions like FE-Cycle, AWIM, Supra, giving lectures and sharing your knowledge in engineering colleges, industrial visits, as well as financial support by way of sponsorship. If we are doing all this, what benefits does it bring to an industry mobility professional? The first one is that as an affiliate of SAE International, you will have free access to e-magazines, either Automotive Engineering International or Aerospace Engineering magazines from SAE International at the click of the mouse. The SAE India also has a mobility engineering magazine, which comes up with new articles on latest upcoming technologies. Members will also have free access to SAE International papers and discounted price to SAE top tech events in the country, like the present one, which is free for members and for participants. There's an opportunity to connect with academia and students and learn from their creativity. Recognition and network. So in short, SAE India is your association and it's run by you. All of you are experts in your respective domains. We therefore request professionals like you and your team to be a part of this platform by becoming SAE members, which will help us deliver quality technical and learning programs through conferences, through events, competitions, conventions, conclaves, etc., and help SAE Northern India section grow further. Let me conclude by giving an example of a very famous athlete, Usain Bolt. You know, he won 9 gold medals in 3 Olympics. But the total time he ran was 115 seconds. But for running that 115 seconds, he earned $115 million, which means for every second he was earning $1 million. So my message to all of you would be that if you invest rupees 10,000 in SAE by becoming an SAE member for 10 years, the revenue or the learning or the earnings that you will get will be far more than what Usain Bolt earned through 20 years of hard work. And that is the reason why, is because you will be enriching yourself with knowledge. You will be enriching yourself with developing your skills. You will be imparting training to a lot of juniors, to students, and more importantly, you will be becoming a leader. So with these words, I look forward to your participation, and let us work together in making this an enlightening and enriching experience for all of us. Thank you once again and happy learning. Just to give you a 2-line introduction about myself, I retired from Indian Oil R&D in 2011, did my chemical engineering in 1974 from Kanpur, and then my MBA from HFS. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. We will start with the main presentations now. We'll have 15 minutes of presentations and 10 minutes of question and answer at the end of each presentation. If you have any questions during the presentation, just write them in the question section, addressing the respective speaker name. We will take that question on your behalf after each presentation. I also request all the speakers of the webinar to kindly keep their presentations ready. I'm sure that the immense knowledge in the presentations will give us a better understanding of automotive functional safety and security. So for the first presentation of the webinar, please join me to welcome Mr. Shinto Joseph. Mr. Shinto Joseph is currently working as Director Southeast Asia Operations at LDRA Technology Private Limited. And he is also Chairman of Training and Skill Development Group under Aspire ITS Subboard. With over 24 years of experience in handling embedded software lifecycle solutions, he has built many teams and companies in the embedded system field, working with cross-border delivery teams, technology partners, and industry regulators in defense, aerospace, automotive, industrial, medical, rail, and nuclear sectors are his unique advantage. Today, he concentrates on creating a healthy ecosystem in the mission, security, and safety critical systems domain in Southeast Asia. We welcome you, sir. We are privileged to have you as our first speaker today. Mr. Shinto Joseph will be presenting on 360-degree digitization and its implication for automotive sector. I now request Mr. Shinto to proceed with his presentation.
Thank you. I should thank, Anup sir and Amelia ma'am for setting the context. More than that, actually, I should thank ICAT for inviting me to chair the Skills Council because skill development is close to my heart. And as a professional, I started my career dealing with critical systems of late, last 15 years at least, more to do with the safety, security. When I started talking to people 10 years back about security implications, people used to laugh. And in fact, before this session, I was talking to ma'am. We organized probably the first functional safety security seminar in ICAT maybe 5 years back. There was hardly any response. But today, the picture is completely different. So that's a turnaround in the industry. So the next, say, 9 minutes plus, I'm going to touch base of what is taking this change. It is not only in automotive industry. You are seeing cut across all the industries, but specific to automotive industry, I'm going to share my screen. My screen is visible, Sonia?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay, great. So I would set the context by what is the 360-degree digitization and how it is impacting the automotive sector. But because understanding this is very important in terms of capturing the opportunities. So this is my rough agenda. So this 360-degree digitization is exactly I mean by the entire, manufacture, design, development, testing, finally the manufacturing, supply chain, sales and marketing, everything is becoming a digital world. And the definition of car itself, you all would have seen, what was car 10, 15 years back. Today, when you are looking at the car, your expectation is rising every year. Now, with this transition, the biggest challenge what we as automotive professionals or even industry guys, traditionally, if you look at, automotive industry is a mechanical industry, to be frank. We have to accept that. And most of the business leaders who are probably, today leading the industry also, they're all mechanical guys. It's a fact. Now, with this background, when we suddenly switch to a digital car, there are a lot of challenges. The design philosophy changes, the testing philosophy changes, certification changes. And for all these things, we need a totally different skill set. So this is the background of my talk. And this is exactly what is happening. The size of software in the cars today is increasing so to that level where it also brings in, okay, you bring in a lot of flexibility, design advantage, functionality, all those things with the software. But software also brings in equally number of challenges. As a company, I work for LDRA. We survive because of this transition and the challenges around that. People are comfortable, but then they're really worried. Once it is loaded, what will happen to my system? Could have safety implications, could have security implications. Now, going further, Because of this transition, if it was about 10 years back, globally, the automotive industry was driven by the production. Production is my capability, and I produce quality cars. That will drive my business. So my focus is always that all the traditional OEMs used to focus on building the production capacity. If they know some R&D, that was the focus. There was hardly any software-related issues or software shift, which I told you, right? Because of this shift towards software and electronics, now what is happening is most of the big players are putting their IP around the electronics and the software. Production, they are ready to outsource. This is not only in automotive industry, cut across. Every industry we are seeing this shift. You saw even defense companies, they're ready to outsource their hardware production, but they're not ready to outsource their software, related electronics related part, because that's where they pack their IPs. So to see the shift in the competency definition of companies, this is exactly what is happening in the automotive industry. So as a business person, if you are heading a company, one should understand this is the drastic shift that is happening, and which also brings in additional challenges. And this is an interesting trend which you all know, right? The case shift, the connected car, autonomous, shared, electrical. This is there everywhere. You go to any conference today, people talk about this. So because of this digitization, electric is another aspect. Maybe the sustainable development goals, the pressure on governments to reduce emissions, that all will add to the electric shift. Better batteries, all those things are helping in shifting that direction. But however, this digital push is creating a thought process. How do I build dependable products for automotive market? Now, for me to understand, somebody to understand, what do you mean by a dependable product? Dependable product is, it should be available, it should be safe, it should be, maintainable, it should be secure. Yeah, it should be reliable. Whenever I want, I should be able to use it. This is the definition of a dependability for any product. Now, when I bring this into the automotive sector, there is something interesting happening. As I told you earlier, the focus was on production. Quality production means do it right every time. You have the Six Sigma, SPICE models, all those things came around that. Now from that, I am getting into a different paradigm from a quality-based approach, which is doing things right every time. Cool, no problem. And product certification in automotive also industry was driven by build to spec, means you have some specifications. Certification agencies also look at, okay, is it been built? Am I having the test reports for these specifications? It is meeting the test report specifications. Fine, clear the item. Now from that, you have a completely different paradigm, which we call it the risk-based approach. That is what's actually disrupting the industry today. A risk-based approach, particularly driven by safety and security risk. To make it further, a risk, when I say, if something fails in your car, it could be a tire, it could be a brake, it could be an airbag not working properly, what does it mean when it is meeting an accident? Is it hazardous? Is it creating injuries? Is it creating death? Or there is no effect of that? For example, a music system in your car failing, there's no safety issue. But if the music system is connected and if it is not tested for security vulnerabilities, it is a huge risk for your car. So assessment need to be done, and my colleague friends and the next two speakers, they're going to talk further on this part. Assessment need to be done, a proper risk assessment need to be done for both safety and security before starting your vehicle design. This is the fundamental shift that has happened in the industry. This creates challenges for everybody, and a risk-based approach, when we implement today in the industry, when I develop an ADAS, when I develop a telematics or a powertrain, this is the way a BMS, you bring in all these parameters, quality, safety, security, regulation, cut across every unit subsystem you're building. You are going to put all these things, do the risk assessment wherever is required, and there are n number of standards which are coming up today. Don't worry about these numbers. You have a lot of ISO standards. There are, learning even taken from the aerospace domain. That's another interesting thing you can see. Across learning is happening. For example, the concepts like AUTOSAR, people from aerospace have taken it, they named it something called phase. Same thing, from automotive. I was talking to another medical manufacturer. He says, I'm taking something from the automotive. So there's a cross-domain adoption also happening for practices and technologies. So this is the major shift which you can see from a traditional, build to spec to a risk-based approach. When you're going, you need standards. You need standards for safety. You need standards for security. So you look at this picture. What is standardized on these devices? It is the interface, right? Imagine the interface was not there. You would have been searching for the next bulb whenever the bulb goes fuse, right? So, but still they compete. You can differentiate. People say standardization kills innovation. You're killing innovation. Sorry, you still can compete by making the difference in the application design. Means the way it is designed, the way even the luminous intensity is been done, or even the disposal, how you dispose the bulb after this. So you still can have differentiation even while you're following standards, right? Now, my conclusion message is, if you really wanted to be successful in this paradigm shift, we need to build expertise at all levels if the industry needs to come up. Academic level, at the regulatory level, at the policy making, at the product certification level, we need skills. And that's exactly the training and skill mandate of Scaling and Skill Development Council at Aspire. And to be frank, I mean, this is a subject which is close to my heart. I always say we need to approach a problem from a holistic angle. You keep your questions ready. I will be concluding this after both Raghavendra and Deepu. I'll come back. I'll try to take your questions, as well as what is that we feel we have something in mind we want to share with you where we should go further. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the excellent presentation. Now, please join me to welcome next speaker of the event, Mr. Raghavendra Bhatt. Mr. Raghavendra Bhatt is Technical Manager for India, Southeast Asia for SBU at ANSYS. Prior to ANSYS, he has worked for Astral, IBM, Telelogics, etc., and has 20+ years of professional experience. He has experience with software development lifecycle, including requirement management, software configuration management, model-based design and development of safety-critical embedded real-time systems and testing. We welcome you, sir. Mr. Raghavendra will be presenting on topic functional safety for ISO 26262 compliance for automotive. I now request Mr. Raghavendra to proceed with his presentation.
You have to unmute.
Mr. Raghavendra, you are requested to unmute yourself.
The red button on the top.
There will be a speaker button on the top. You tap it on, it will turn from.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It just happened that.
No
you
problem.
can
No
hear me,
problem.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there was a pop-up on another screen, and I didn't realize that. So, well, good morning, everyone. Are you able to see my slides as well?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. First of all, thanks to Anup sir and Pamela madam and the organizers for giving me this opportunity to speak here. And Shinto has set the excellent stage on his digitization talk. And I'm going to take a thread out of that digitization and continue with this discussion. And of course, thanks a lot to all the participants who took their time off and join us today on the session. So let's get started with the background. Of course, this is coming from where Shinto has started off on the digitization thread. Now, for those of us that are familiar with the vehicles several years ago, I mean, not just quite then, but several years ago, a car used to be a completely mechanical system. And these mechanical systems had a lot of limitations in the sense that, let's say, if you happen to go to your car and start the car in a cold morning, it was a little bit of ritual. You just couldn't get into the car and start it off and drive it around. That wasn't just possible. That was not possible. So you had to take care of a couple of things in the car to make sure that it starts. And after it starts, you had to let it idle for a while until the engine is heated up and engine is warm, and then you could really go ahead and start driving your car. And depending on the different weather conditions, depending on the other environmental factors, depending on the wear and tear of the car, if you happen to own a car, you're not just the driver, you also happen to be a part-time mechanic. That's how the cars used to be before we had all of these electronic software that are coming into the vehicle. Now, this is precisely where the digitization that Shinto was talking about has started adding value to our vehicles, adding value to everything, not only rather vehicles, rather everything. And these electronics and software that are coming into the picture has changed the world for us. Now, what precisely is happening here is that considering the same case before, when we were talking about a car that just couldn't start early in the morning, today you have electronics that automatically measure the various engine parameters and the environmental factors and the conditions. And it knows this is an early morning, engine is cold, and now the regular air fuel mixture is not really good enough to start the car or sustain the engine. So it automatically decides the ratio and it changes the ratio, it makes the fuel rich, and then it starts the car. So today, if you're getting into the car, you're just getting in, turning the key, or maybe you're just pressing a button and you're ready to drive off. Everything else that happens in the car is behind the scene. It's taken care of for us. And what is causing this magic? How is this happening here today? It's all because of electronics. Now, if you're looking into the car as a traditional vehicle, an ICE engine vehicle, there are already a lot of electronics going into them. It may be engine control system, it may be transmission control system, it's chassis controls, body controls, headlamp controls, and so many window controls, and so many systems that already are present in these vehicles. But today we are talking about vehicles that are far beyond the traditional ICE cars. Today we are talking about electric vehicles. Today we are talking about ADAS systems. Today we are talking about autonomous systems and so on. And you only can imagine the amount of electronics and software that will get into these cars, and how the influence of electronics and software is going to be on these cars. Now, on this subject, while we are talking about the electronics and software, one thing that we have to keep in mind for sure is that electronics fail. They can fail and they will fail. It's fact of life. So most of these electronic functions that are built into our cars have some of the other safety implications to it. For example, if you're talking about something like ABS function. Now you have ABS function built into your car, and that gives you a certain level of confidence while you are driving this car. And that confidence comes from the fact that the ABS will kick in and help you stop the car when you really want to stop it in the right way. But if there is a problem with the electronics, if there is a problem with the software that fails to behave the way it is supposed to behave, this ABS function is not something that you can depend on. You cannot rely on this function. So all the safety functions, safety parameters of your vehicles are now controlled by software and electronics. And anything that goes wrong with this has a potential to contribute to hazard. And on this slide, I have a couple of representations here, not to point out on any specific representation, but all that I want to talk about here is that it is fact of life that electronics and software can and they will fail. And when they fail, it is very likely that we have significant damage caused because of their failure. And this is what really drives us into making the system safer. This is one of the very important consideration why we are talking about functional safety so seriously these days. And this is one part of the contribution from the safety perspective. But another angle to it is the requirements from the Product Liability Directive. Now, in most of the European countries, of course, started off in Germany and then spread across the Europe, and now it is pretty much worldwide. So this particular directive puts the OEM straight away as a responsible entity if there is a damage caused because of the product that he has produced. So it is applicable to cars today. And if there are faults in the car, or if there is a hazard that happened in the car due to the problems in the OEM's manufacturing, or maybe in the system that OEM has put in place, then he's the one that's going to take responsibility to this problem. And this is one of the very, very important considerations, which is driving the whole industry today. So everyone wants to make sure that the systems are safe. Now the systems, everyone wants to make it safer. But however, at the same time, we need to have certain guideline or certain regulations to say how much safety is necessary, how much safety is required. Now again, the same directive gives us the ideas to talk about this fact as well. So if the OEM follows the state-of-the-art practices in terms of the design, development, and validation of the system that is available to him at the time when he has put together this vehicle, then he is free from that liability. Now, what is the state-of-the-art that we are talking about today? And that is ISO 26262 standard. This ISO 26262 has 12 parts today, and in each of the parts, it's addressing a particular part of how we can build the safety into this automotive system. And this is something that has become very, very important to the entire automotive industry today, whether it's OEM and then tier suppliers and the suppliers to the third level and so on. Not only about the people that are putting together the car, but it goes all the way down to the semiconductors. Now, we talked about so many electronics and software being put into the vehicle. Now, today, you see that there are some short supply of certain car models these days. And one of the reasons for the short supply is the short supply of the semiconductor. Because of the pandemic that happened now that we are living today, there is a short supply of semiconductor, and it significantly affected the manufacturing of cars. So you see the dependency of electronics in the vehicle, which is today's scenario. And so this functional safety analysis starts all the way at the top level, at the vehicle level, and coming down to the tier supplier who's putting together these functionality, and then the integrated circuits that are going to be manufactured by the IP manufacturers, IC manufacturers. So it is covering the entire segment, starting from the chip to the system and to the overall vehicle. So that's coming from, that's what we are looking at today. And now looking into the modern vehicles these days, we already talked about electric vehicles, we talked about autonomous vehicles, we talked about advanced driver assistance systems and the connected vehicles and so on. So all of these systems are adding newer functionalities and latest capabilities into the vehicles. And these are primarily controlled by electronics and software. And once again, anything that goes wrong with these are essentially going to be fatal to the vehicle. Now, I'm not only talking about from the safety perspective here, we also can look into a holistic perspective, including the security and safety of the intended functionality. And that's what I wanted to address at this point. So functional safety, as we are talking about, we primarily are talking about things that could go wrong in the system that we have put in place. So here we want to understand every single thing, every single function, every single part of the design to see what could really go wrong here. And if it goes wrong, do I have a mechanisms to detect it, or do I have a mechanisms to prevent it? And essentially, how are we going to make sure that this particular fault doesn't lead to an undesirable risk and a hazard at the end of the day? So that is primarily from the functional safety. This is all about assessing the system that we are building and putting in the vehicle. Now, security is another very important domain. We make sure that our system is safe, but what about someone trying to get into our system and hacking into the system that we have put together? We have, let's say, the CAN communication. The CAN bus is something that is quite commonly used in the vehicle, which is going to carry the messages across different ECUs. Now, what if someone manages to hack into the CAN bus and some spurious messages? So ECUs think something which not actually has been originated in the vehicle, right? So these kind of situations could potentially lead to someone taking over the vehicle, and now you only can imagine that what somebody can do with such kind of control if they manage to get into the vehicle. They could actually take over many critical functionality of the vehicle. It could be acceleration, it could be steering, or it could be braking. Many things they can get access into if they manage to get into the vehicle's network. And then what they really want to do, it depends on all their intention, malintention, I would say. Now, talking about ADAS and autonomous vehicles in these days, there is another important consideration that also comes into picture. For example, when we are building an ADAS system or driver assistance systems, let's consider something like a lane keep assist as a system. So your car, you switch on the lane keep assist, it monitors the lane in which the car is being driven, and it tries to make sure that the car is maintained in the same lane. Now, this functionality is enabled by having the camera vision in the system, and the camera tells you the lanes, and then it helps the system to make the decision automatically. But then, despite everything working perfectly fine, there is a possibility that a piece of paper might get stuck onto the camera. So in this case, camera just can't say anything despite everything working normally. So how do we take care of this situation? These are all practical situations that could occur. This is just one of the examples. There are many, many such things that could happen. Maybe there is a bird dropping that covers the camera lens, or maybe there is many other possibility due to which camera cannot really do what it is supposed to do. It's not only about camera, about any other sensor that we have in our system that provides ADAS functionality. So, given these situations that are practically possible, we have to take care of these things systematically. And that is primarily the concern of SOTIF. And now coming here from the functional safety perspective, what are the kind of actions or what kind of activities that we need to do right from the beginning? So here, to ensure the overall safety of the system, we primarily split this into two parts. One is the context-aware analysis, which is done by the OEM, having known the fact that what kind of vehicle is putting together and what are the expected environments in which this is going to be driven, what are the perimeters of the usage of this vehicle, and so on, which is primarily the domain of the OEMs. And then the typical nature of automotive domain, where the OEMs will outsource this development part into tier supplier, who's actually responsible for putting together the system and the software and test and validate it and supply it back to the OEM. So there are certain set of activities that the tier supplier will perform. So that is the technical safety concept part. So starting at the very top level, we are going to start by looking into the vehicle level functions. And we want to understand what could really go wrong about each of these functions. And then we want to understand if this malfunction should occur under different driving situations. Like typically, it is not to say that a malfunction will have the same impact under all driving situations, all driving scenarios. So we need to understand if a particular malfunction occurs while the vehicle is being driven in the city, or while the vehicle is being driven on a highway, or while the vehicle is accelerating or braking or reversing. So there are a bunch of driving situations that we can put together, having known the typical parameter of the vehicle usage. Then we can understand what could really go wrong, how severe this effect would be if there is a hazard because of this, and what are the controllability to the driver, and what are the exposures of this particular event from occurring, based on which we are going to come up with the ASIL rating for a particular event. And then once we have the ASIL rating, we have to define the safety goal, and from the safety goal, we're going to derive the safety requirements, and these safety requirements need to be implemented in the system architecture, and then we allocate these safety requirements into the architecture, and then finally we are going to create our functional safety concept, wherein we argue that we understood the architecture that we have put together, we understand the malfunctions that could happen here, and then we have put in place the measures that would reasonably control these things so that the risk is acceptable here, right? That is the first part. And then when we move on to the technical safety concept side, once again, the requirements coming from the OEM with the details of the functional safety concept, this will be taken over by the tier supplier, and they are going to implement their own safety mechanism as they build the system. So they're going to primarily look into this from two aspects. One is from the hardware safety aspects, and the other one is from the software safety aspect. Now, from the hardware safety aspect, we have to understand each and every component that we use in the design of our systems and see what kind of failures could possibly occur here, and what would be the impact of these failures at the system level. That is starting all the way at the component level and trying to understand the failures all the way to the top of the system. So typical failure modes and effects analysis is what's going to be done over here. Now, there are also certain quantitative requirements here. So when we are talking about quantitative requirement, there are certain guidelines, there are certain suggestions, requirement from the standard to say what level of failures is acceptable in the different levels of ASIL of the system. So to do that, we need to perform the failure rate prediction for the individual components based on the failure rate catalogs that are available, and then understand whether this particular failure would really contribute to the safety of the system, and do we have a mechanism to detect or to prevent this one, and what level of confidence do we have in those mechanisms, and then what is the residual level of failure that finally will be seen at the vehicle level. So all of these analysis needs to be done at the hardware level, including the fault tree analysis to help us identify the root causes that would contribute to the violation of our top level code. So these are all the set of activities that we need to perform from the umbrella of functional safety. Now, there are similar set of activities that needs to be carried out on the software side. However, there is one important distinction between the hardware and software. Now, with the hardware, we know that we have electronic components who have certain failures, and these failures are random. So despite having the best quality of the component that you want to use, they still have failures in them and they fail randomly. However, when we look into the software side, there is nothing called randoms. In software world, everything is systematic. If there is a failure, this failure has been there all along, just that it didn't show up so far. That's all about it. But this failure has been there in the software that we have programmed it right from day one. We haven't seen it so far. That's all about it. So everything is systematic. So when we know that the issues are all systematic, the only way that we could improve the safety and quality of the software is by systematic process to make sure that the software that we develop complies with the required standard. The software that we develop is in line with the expected quality requirements, is in line with the expected safety requirement. And by performing the verification, validation, and then asset reviews and so on the software side to ensure the safety of the software components. Now, of course, software by alone is not something that will make or break. It is actually the system at the top level that will see all these impacts, but the software is going to be sitting on the electronics and together, which can fail, which is what we need to analyze systematically. And then finally, we also need to perform what's called as dependent failure analysis to say if there is one failure which could contribute to the failures of other things, or there is one cause that could impact multiple components of my system. So all of these things need to be analyzed. There are more than this. I just made it a bit more simple here. And at this point, I would conclude my talk and hand it off to my colleague Deepu, who would cover the details on the software safety perspective and how we could systematically improve the safety of software functionality on his side of the session. Now, before to that, maybe if there are any questions.
Thank you, sir, for the excellent presentation. It was very precise and relevant presentation. We have received some questions from our delegates. We'll take some questions on their behalf. First question is by Mr. Suren Zambare. And his question is, while you mentioned shift in pyramid, quality manufacturing still remains a key aspect. Change needs to be looked by a quality of collaboration between technology and manufacturing, and not as a simple shift on technology, on reliability. What is your view on this?
I think that
you can see the question in your chat box also. Mr. Raghavendra, you can see.
I suspect because I am the one who used that slide. Maybe okay. I will clarify that. So don't worry, quality still remains. Without a quality, no car will undergo production or customer acceptance. Okay, what is happening is, this is purely based on my observation. I've been watching major OEMs as well as semicon vendors across the globe, and when this issue started coming in, typically most of the OEMs took a stand. Okay, let us outsource these electronics and systems to some vendors. The tier 1 vendor will take care of all these things. But because of that, what has happened is, after some time only they realize that somehow they are losing the competency itself, because the definition of car is completely changing, right? So quality still remains, no doubt on that. And but if the manufacturer or an OEM need to differentiate his car going forward, it is this area he has to focus, where safety, security play a major role. The design perspective has to completely change. Production side, in any of the aspects, no doubt, your whatever quality professionals, whatever you learned is still relevant, absolutely fine. But then what would give you an edge in the market is, have we done this shift towards a risk-based assessment to meet the, the new paradigm? That's what I meant. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Next question is for Mr. Ravindra Bhatt, and the question is from Mr. Sachin Kumar Lal. Question is, can quality function deployment in the process control phase help in limiting the failure rate in the automotive sector?
Okay, thanks for that question. Very important. So there are two things. One is the quality control process, which is very essential in any system development. Now, the quality control primarily is going to help us in terms of systematic issues. Like, for example, if there are problems because of, let's say, certain fitment is not accurate, it is not within the tolerance, or maybe certain process in terms of manufacturing the electronics, etc., is not controlled very well, and so on. So these are the kind of issues that are probably stem from the process point of view. For example, while you are soldering the electronic components onto the PCB, it also matters about the environments, the hygiene of the environment, the humidity level at the environments, the temperature at which we perform the soldering, and the time to which this temperature is exposed to those electronic components, and many other factors. It could be the vibration, it could be the noise, it could be the humidity, or it could be dust, and many other things that we want to systematically control and reduce, so that our manufacturing process is very clean and precise. Now, this would definitely help us in improving the overall quality of the system, and of course to reduce the failure rate of the system as well. Now, this by alone is not going to help us in the complete functional safety of the system, because what we also need to do is to see, in case if certain things fail, what is the end result, right? So with the strict quality control process, with the strict quality control mechanism, what we could do is to reduce the possibility of occurrence of the failure, right? But we cannot really make it zero despite our best efforts. Now, if in such cases, when there is a failure, what would really happen at the end of the day? So what kind of hazard is going to cause, and what would be the risk if such a hazard would occur? So all of these things needs to be systematically looked at and analyzed, and these things have to be implemented right from the architecture level. Like, for example, when I'm putting together an architecture for something like electronic steering lock. So this is basically a mechanism where your steering is going to be locked while you remove the key from the vehicle, and as soon as the ignition is turned on, as soon as the key is in your key slot, the lock is going to be unlocked, or it's open. Now, if I have an architecture in such a way that keeping the steering lock open is dependent on the power supply, let's imagine that, right? So now if there is any problem, if there is a fuse that is burnt out, or if there is any problem with the power supply, the solenoid that is keeping the lock open is no more receiving the power anymore. So it's going to go back and lock the steering wheel. So which means the car may still be moving, and I will end up locking the steering wheel. Now, this is definitely not desirable, and this kind of situations can be looked at and analyzed while you are looking into the overall architecture. The moment you see your architecture, you understand that the architecture which I have designed is probably going to cause a problem somewhere in the life of the system, so this is not acceptable. So this is coming from the functional safety perspective. Of course, the quality process is important. It will help us in reducing the overall failures of the system, but what we also do from the functional safety side is much beyond just improving the quality process, but also to systematically look at the architecture, systematically look at the hardware, systematically look at the software, and then try and improve wherever there is a weakness. So that's my view here.
Thank you, sir. Our next question is from Ms. Chitra CS, and the question is how safety as culture can be improved at organization level, irrespective of the roles.
Can you repeat that question? I couldn't see it.
The question is how safety as a culture can be improved at organization level, irrespective of the roles.
Okay. So safety, like a quality, is a culture, like you rightly represented here, rightly said. So this is something we have to start off based on certain pedestals. So there are standards like ISO 26262. You have ASPICE standard, which provides you the regular quality standards, and on top of it, there are ISO 26262 standard that provides you certain references, certain guidelines on what needs to be taken care of while you plan to improve the safety of your overall system. Now, these are the things where we have to start, which is the pedestal, the basic step, I would say. Now, from this point onwards, it's a continuous learning. So you have made your efforts, you have improved the safety of the system by systematically analyzing everything, and you brought in certain improvements at the system. Now you're going to put this in the market, and you're going to observe the reaction or the result of these improvements. And then whatever that you get to learn from the field is going to be a feedback to your process improvement, which is a continuous process. So every single time you hear something, every single time you see something goes wrong, you take that as a feedback and improve that system. For example, just a concrete example. So, in one of the vehicles quite a long time ago, so there are AC vents that are mounted just on top of an audio system. And these AC vents, as you know, typically they have the tendency of fogging, and then there is a possibility of water dripping. And in this particular vehicle, there was nothing to cover between the AC vents and the actual audio system, which means the water dripping from the AC vents could actually get into your electronics and could cause short circuit. Well, now, despite our best effort, we couldn't see this happening before we could leave the vehicle out, deploy the vehicle on the road. So now that we understood there was a problem like this, we started taking care of it. And now this becomes standard practice. It's taken care of everywhere. So this is how we learn the limitations and the issues that happen in the field and try to improve the safety of the overall system by learning what happens in the field. So that is a continuous process, I would say.
Thank you, sir. And we'll take the last question for this session right now, and rest of the question we'll take, if we have time, due to time constraint, we'll take in the last session. So last question is from Mr. Shenthil Kumaran. The question is, any efforts on the end user privacy, like personal drive pattern, movement, etc., being used by OEM, government, regulator, etc.?
So end user privacy is also definitely an important concern. It comes under the security aspect of our system. So what we are doing here is there are security standards. So my colleague Deepu is going to talk a little more about these things. So the security standards ISO 21434, I believe, is an industry standard now, which is going to be something that is mandatory as we go forward. So here, from the security perspective, we once again try and analyze the entire system and try and see what are the possibilities where the information can be leaked. Now, the security is not only about the personal privacy of the end user. The security has much larger impact than that. It could be something to do with the OEM itself, or it could be with a vehicle, or it could be with the user of the vehicle, or there could be a lot of other possibilities as a result of violation of the security issues in the vehicle. So there are standards that are coming out, and these standards are going to be strictly mandated in the industry, and every new vehicle that's going to come out will have to adhere to these industry standards. Now, these standards will once again require you to perform your security analysis in collaboration with safety analysis alongside. For example, if you are talking about, I spoke to you about CAN bus having a most common communication bus, which can carry information from ECUs across your vehicle network. Now, let's say somebody can hack into the CAN bus and you want to secure the CAN bus, which means you probably are going to implement your encryption, end-to-end encryption feature into the CAN bus. Now, what exactly is happening here is you try to improve the security of the system, but you're probably also impacting the safety, because when you're implementing the encryption, you have at source, you have to encrypt the message, and at the destination, you have to decrypt the message, which is going to be additional load on the hardware that you have put together. So this additional load would take extra time to do this work, and this extra time is not really fitting in from your safety perspective, for example. So your safety and security should go parallel, go side by side, So both the analysis needs to be done together with their interdependencies, and then finally we have to arrive at a solution. So obviously the user privacy and the user security is a very important consideration, and there are standards coming into force, and these standards will definitely help ensure better privacy to the user in addition to rest of the security measures of the vehicle.
Thank you, sir. Due to time constraint, we will not be able to take all the questions here. I request all the delegates to kindly mail us your queries, and we'll get back to you with a reply from the expert. Thank you, Mr. Raghavendra, for this excellent presentation. I hope you all are enjoying the proceedings so far. For the last presentation of the webinar, I would like to welcome Mr. Deepu Chandran. Mr. Deepu Chandran is a graduate from Vishwasaraya Technological University and an ISO certified functional safety professional with experience in aerospace, automotive, and industrial domains. His research work is focused on embedded safety, system security. He has spent more than 14 years supporting clients in selection, integration, and maintenance of embedded systems throughout the development lifecycle. Mr. Deepu Chandran is currently working as technical manager with LDRA India office. We welcome you, sir. Mr. Deepu Chandran will be presenting on the topic safety and security considerations for automotive software. I now request Mr. Chandran to proceed with his presentation.
Thank you, Sonia. I believe I'm audible and my screen is visible.
Yes, sir. You are audible and your screen is also visible.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to take up this discussion from a 10,000 feet to 1,000 feet. That is my objective. So first of all, good afternoon to all of you. So what I'm planning to do in this 15 minutes is to provide you an idea of what are the activities you need to do when safety and security are considerations for your automotive software. So during the introduction, we have seen about the relationship between quality, safety, and security. And from a quality-based approach of developing the products, we have seen how a risk-based approach need to be followed to build in safety and security. So I will a little bit touch upon that. And then we will directly go to the ISO 26262 standards. What are the challenges during the software development activities and how to overcome those challenges? And how do we ensure that we are able to create the evidences that are necessary for achieving the process compliance? So first, let us look into the overview of quality, safety, and security. So as Shindo mentioned, from a quality-based approach, we are moving towards a risk-based approach. So the challenges that we need to address here is we need to ensure that whether we are building in safety as well as security. So safety and security never comes accidentally. We need to address it right from the concept stage of an item. So item is a technical terminology which is defined as a system or a combination of n number of system at the vehicle functionality level according to ISO 26262. So whenever we have the concept of developing an item, we need to ensure that whether safety and security are concerns, then we need to start addressing it. So I would like to talk about a secure software lifecycle development model, comparing it with the traditional web-based applications and how traditionally people have been looking at security during their development activities. So traditionally, if you look at people were trying to do some coding, and mostly for web-based applications, it was a kind of an agile process that has been followed for at least last 20 years, where once the code is developed, you create an executable, and then you start doing all the kind of reactive testing. So this testing includes fuzz testing or network analysis or data or packet monitoring. So the live executable will be running on the network, and then you introduce a lot of errors or a random set of combination of inputs into this application, and then you try to see that how it is behaving. Is it crashing or is it deviating from the intended behavior? So this is what you will be looking at. But this approach is called as a reactive testing, where the executable itself is not dependable. That means it do not have the property of behaving it according to its intended behavior during when an attack is there, as well as there can be possibility of malicious logic within this executable, and they may not be having the properties of resilience. So resilience in the sense means even if there is an attack, it should have the capability of regaining into its actual operating conditions. But that was not a consideration for the web-based application. So from this reactive mode of testing, right now, testing comes at an early stage. So that means whenever you have your requirements documents, you need to start your verification. Whenever the design is ready, you need to ensure that you have done enough verification on the design to ensure that you have all the threat models built in, and your design is capable of detecting all the security vulnerabilities. And whenever the code is ready, you are trying to ensure that apply the coding standards for secure application developments and see that vulnerabilities do not exist, as well as measure the code coverage and ensure that the attack surface is minimized. So this is a proactive approach where your security risk assessment drives the priority for this kind of testing activity, and a lot of testing will be done proactively, which includes the code reviews, functional test, structural coverage analysis, as well as additional security tests called as robustness testing for embedded system. So in this approach, from a reactive to proactive, you can ensure that the executable what is created is a dependable one, trustworthy one, as well as it is exhibiting the property of resilience. So now what process standards are available? So across the industry, if we look at for quality based approach or for safety or security based approach, a lot of process standards are evolving in each of the domains. For example, in automotive industry, as you know that ISO 26262 plays a major role from a safety perspective, and from a quality perspective, we have the standards like automotive SPICE. And from a security perspective, as of now, SAE J3061 is the standard which is being widely adopted, which will be replaced by the ISO SAE 21434. And the final draft of this standard is available now for public. But the problem here is this particular standard is from the management perspective. So it do not have any details of the methods or principles that need to be applied in each phase of the life cycle during the software development process. So in that way, if you have a comparison with SAE J3061 and ISO SAE 21434, I would say that J3061 still has the techniques and methods clearly defined for each phase of the life cycle activities. So there is a lot of hype in this new standard, but I still feel that it is not matured enough. Maybe in the future versions we can expect that they may be including the methods and principles also, which is very relevant for applying it during the life cycle activities. Now, when you have a safe or secure system to be developed, a lot of challenges are there in the path of developing the software for a safety related or a security related system. It starts from the requirement traceability itself. So in the previous session, Mr. Bhatt was talking about performing a hazard analysis and creating a technical safety concept. So once you have the technical safety concept and the architecture at the system level, you will be dividing it into hardware level requirements as well as software level requirements. So the requirements consist of your functional requirements, security requirement, as well as safety requirements. So traceability plays an important role. You need to ensure that your safety goal is not violated, and verification of these requirements need to be performed using reviews as well as establishment of traceability. And the next challenge is to track all the objectives within the process lifecycle. So initially what you do when you develop a secure or safe system is you tailor the standard. So if you are applying 21434 or along with ISO 26262, initially you come up with a set of customized objective which is applicable for your product development, and you need to ensure that you are able to fulfill all the objectives defined in your tailored standard. And similarly, coding standard compliance, again, you need to do a lot of customization with your coding standards because your application may be safety as well as security critical. So appropriate rules and directives from MISRA or CERT or CWE need to be pulled in, and a custom standard need to be created and which need to be followed during the product development, and performing an analysis on the data and control coupling. So this is also very important because ISO 26262 highly recommended to perform the data and control coupling analysis at the architectural stage itself. So if you have a model which can be simulated, definitely you can do it at the architecture level. But in case if you have your architecture as a document like high-level design document or low-level design document, then ideally you can also perform it once the code is ready. And structural coverage measurement, performing the target testing for higher ASIL applications like for ASIL level C or ASIL level D, and tool qualification and compliance management according to the 26262 process. So these are challenges we need to address it right from during the planning stage itself. So which will help us to reduce the cost of compliance, and also we can manage it with a distributed team, and also it will reduce the time to compliance and deliver the product into the market. So now let us see how we can parallelly apply a functional safety and cybersecurity process. So as I told earlier, right from the product concept itself, we need to tailor these standards and we need to apply these objectives in the beginning. So for functional safety, hazard and risk analysis will be performed. So as Bhatt mentioned, you will be looking at all the situation where situation analysis will be one of your inputs to do this hazard analysis and risk assessment. You identify your risk, classify your risk, you prioritize the risk, and the safety goals will be formulated according to the risks which are identified. Then you will be having a set of safety requirements which will help you to ensure that safety is being built into the system. So similarly, on the right hand side, threat analysis and risk assessment need to be done, which is usually called as a TARA analysis. So the same expertise what you have for performing the HARA analysis may not be enough for doing the threat analysis and risk assessment. So you may need expertise from different domains and different set of people with different levels of experience to perform the threat analysis and risk assessment. When you have a defined set of risks at the HARA analysis, it may not be similar for the TARA analysis. For the TARA, it may not be a finite set of risk. The risk will be always evolving for security issues. So at least you should be able to identify the maximum possible issues that can come up in the future. And the security goals need to be formulated to avoid it, and which will be part of the security requirements. So the overall safety and security requirement allocation need to be done for the system, and then you need to define your safety integrity levels or security levels, and the subsequent development of the system as well as the software need to happen. So this is how a parallel tailored process will help you to defend against random and systematic failures to protect from harm, as well as you can defend against negligent and willful actions to protect devices and facilities. So now we are looking at the 26262. So we can see here the latest edition, which is the 2080 edition of ISO 26262, how complex and exhaustive it is. So if you look at here, there are 12 parts, 104 chapters, 37 annexes, and 812 pages. That means a lot of activities are defined with techniques, methods, and tables provided for each of these activities. So it becomes a tedious job to comply with this process. So that is where the tailoring process plays a major role. And also it provides you a safety life cycle. So safety life cycle, already in the previous session, it has been discussed, like how do you mitigate the hazard and risk which are identified by allocating to some other technologies like mechanical or hydraulic. Sometimes external measures will help you to reduce the risk which is identified. Sometimes you will be able to build in a kind of a control which can actually help you to overcome the risk which you have identified. So these measures will be applied during the product development. So not only the functional inputs will be going, even the diagnostics features as well as the fault identification, fault detection, fault indication, and fault controllability features will be built into the product. And also the safety life cycle provides you a set of confirmation measures which will help you to ensure that you are able to monitor and control the progress of the product development, whether it is happening according to the safety activities mentioned in the process or not. So what is expected from the life cycle in a nutshell? Planning, coordinating, and monitoring of the progress of safety activities can be performed. And also we can ensure that the confirmation measures are performed. So confirmation measures includes the reviews to ensure that the evidences you create in each phase of the life cycle are sufficient and convincing. And apart from the confirmation reviews, audits will be there to ensure that the process has been followed and it is adequate for ensuring functional safety. And the final safety assessment for the product to state that the product has achieved functional safety. So these are the confirmation measures which is expected from the safety life cycle, so that you can start the production and the set of activities for the deployment can be planned. So to address the challenges for achieving the process compliance, there are a lot of verification activity we need to perform. The first thing is like linking the requirements, design, code, and the test. So forward traceability as well as backward traceability need to be established. So the activities on the left hand side of the picture, what you are seeing here, those all are analytical in nature, because verification has to be performed on the requirements, on the design, as well as on the code at the static level. That means without running the code, you need to perform the quality analysis as well as the code reviews to confirm that the code is complying with the coding standards that you have defined. The right hand side activities are like unit testing, integration testing, or an acceptance testing. These all are runtime analysis. So analytical verification as well as runtime verification need to be performed, and the evidences that you need to create is the traceability reports on the left hand side of the V model as well as on the right hand side of the V model. So vertical traceability and horizontal traceability plays a major role in providing it as an evidence for the verification activity for the whole life cycle. So this is an example of how exactly traceability works. So you can see here I have a mapping in the LDRA toolsuite from the system level requirements to multiple high level requirements, and each high level requirement is fulfilled with multiple low level requirement and finally linking to the source code. So this can be produced as an HTML report also in a matrix format. So this is the evidence which usually people will be using for verifying the requirements and performing a requirement based testing. So coding standard compliance. So as of now, many of us are aware that we have the MISRA coding standards, AUTOSAR coding standards for the latest versions of C++, as well as coding standards very specifically looking into security vulnerabilities like coding standards from CERT or CWE. So ideally what we need to do is we need to ensure that we are picking up the right rules, recommendations, and directives from these standards, and we are creating a customized subset and then applying it for our project, which will help us to ensure that we do not have any kind of vulnerabilities existing in our code. So automated coding standard compliance can be performed on the source code what is developed, which will help to eliminate the defects at an early stage in the life cycle. And also there are a lot of matrices available to measure the software quality. Some of these matrices are like cyclomatic complexity, Halstead matrix, including the vocabulary length and volume, and the number of nodes can be measured, fan in, fan out can be measured. So there are at least 15 plus matrices available to measure the software quality. So ISO 26262 also recommends in part 2 in the management level activities to ensure that there is a defined set of guidelines to measure the software quality. So maybe 3 or 4 of these matrices can be picked up, and you can define the limits like what should be the maximum upper limit for such kind of metric values, and then you can compare your code against these matrices to ensure that the desired quality level is achieved during the code development. Now 26262 also gives you tables. Here is one example for a table where the methods for deriving the test cases are described in this table. So always the test need to be done according to the requirements. So that means you need to create a test plan as per the requirement, which covers all the aspects of the requirement, and the test cases need to be developed according to the test plan, which is linked with the requirement. And also some additional methods like error guessing based on knowledge or experience. So this is like robustness testing, where you need to ensure that all the boundary value analysis has been done, or if you have error seeding techniques, like from your experience, if you have a feeling that there are few more inputs which are required, which will be deviating the behavior, then you may be able to provide those set of inputs and test it for robustness. Robustness testing is very, very essential for security as part of the security testing, because the conditional boundaries or data type boundaries or error guessing, error seeding, or a random combination of input can be provided and we can test it. So all these tests need to be based on the requirement. So if it is a unit level testing, usually low level requirement to test case traceability need to be there. This is an example for a report where low level requirements to low level test cases, the forward traceability and the backward traceability shows up. So wherever the requirements are not covered by at least a single test case, which will be highlighted in the report, and requirement coverage will be achieved whenever you are able to cover each and every requirement with at least one test case. So these are the reports which are required to claim compliance with the verification activities. And also you need to measure the structural coverage. Structural coverage is important from a functional point of view as well as from a safety and security point of view. So from a security point of view, we look at whether there is any attack surface within the code. So if we have 100% code coverage based on our test case execution according to the low level requirement, that ensures that the attack surface is minimized within the code itself, and the code do not have any malicious logic which can be triggered by someone to get control over the application. So that is how in security the perspective is from code level. And finally, the robustness testing, apart from functional testing, a number of abuse cases or abuse case inputs need to be provided to perform the robustness testing. This is very much equivalent to the first testing that web-based applications do. So during fuzzing, what they do is like a random combination of input will be bombarded into the running application, and you see that whether it is crashing or not. But in case of embedded systems, usually a robustness testing is good enough. The same logic of providing a random combination of input will be applied, but instead of looking at whether it is crashing or not, you look at whether the behavior of the application is getting deviated or not. So that is what is expected from a safety or a secure application. So one example here is the use case of a pointer input. It may be pointing to a structure and accessing the elements, but the abuse case is pointing to null, pointing to a physical memory location, pointing to a dynamic memory location, or pointing the pointer with the initial declaration value. Okay, so these things can be applied automatically. Test case can be created, and you can prove it as a testing methodology for security. So finally, you will be able to show compliance with the evidences that are generated during the process lifecycle activity, which will help you for certification licensing, and also to perform the audits during each lifecycle stages. Checklist also can be there in each lifecycle stages to ensure that the confirmation reviews are performed according to the plan, and additional training and skills are required for the team. So if that is also provided to the team, that will help you to easily manage your compliance with ISO 26262 certification. So automated, integrated, and qualified tools will provide a way for easily doing that. So this is just an example of many tools which are integrated together in the V model. So if you have qualified, integrated, and automated tools, that will help you to achieve it very quickly. So to summarize, select the right process standard, tailor it, build safety and security into each life cycle stages, and use automated tools and continue the good practices. So thank you very much. So if there are questions, if there is time, I can try.
What we will do is we will take questions later, as a common pool. Before that, what we will do is, many people are asking, where do we go further? What is that, the skills team at Aspire is trying to do? In fact, yesterday, a lot of people pinged me in LinkedIn also, where are you guys going? So let me summarize. You understood, right? Safety, security is only one aspect of the paradigm shift what we are seeing. The whole industry needs expertise on multiple levels. As I told you, at the academia level, at the regulatory level, at the certification level, policy making, whole lot of things has to change. So what the training and skill development group at Aspire is trying to do is, we are trying to come up with a series of courses which are in line with the the shift which is happening in the industry. So some of the traditional skills what we have in the automotive industry, I would say they might become redundant. Okay, that's what is happening right now. Some skills may not be required. You would have seen diesel engine disappearing, traditional, some of the mechanical skills becoming not so important. So there are two challenges. One is skilling fresh professionals. The other one is reskilling some existing guys who are there in the industry. So we're going to immediately give priority to the reskilling part, how to train the existing workforce to align to these shifts, because that is very important. Otherwise, what will happen is they'll become jobless in the near future. So reskilling as well as skilling, both are on the card. And right now we are looking at Joshi Saab, who's there in our lead. He and myself, we both are trying to work together along with the committee members, come up with a series of courses. The first course which we identified is, I'll just share the screen, what we are trying to do to get you a better picture. So this is a group, and as I told you, this is a vision of this group, build skills at all levels. And the first course is on functional safety and security, thanks to LDRA and as the industry partner. So we are going to announce it in the month of August. The course will be very affordable. That means per session we are looking at for each course there are two courses. One is on functional safety, the other one is on cyber security. The trainers will be primarily, it will be Deepu Chandran and Raghavendra. Don't worry, we are going to get some more industry folks as resource person in between during these classes. Now we hope to start it in August, complete towards September, October mid time frame. That is what we are trying to do. So this is what the first course content will be. Somebody asked, there were some questions. If I want to become a safety professional, what all things I should learn? If I want to become a cyber security guy, what all things I should learn? So these basic framework to get into that game, it's what we are trying to teach you. And okay, now as I told you, this is not going to stop. This is not going to stop. This is only the first program right now. In fact, I already started interacting with another one or two organizations, because we have concepts like simulation, digital twin, AutoSAR, whole lot of things which are coming up in this space. Even materials areas also, there are a lot of improvements are happening. Even you take areas like a battery is the area which is going to make a huge impact in the coming days. So we will be partnering with more and more organizations. If somebody listening to me yesterday, a couple of organizations pinged me. They said they can contribute. We welcome everybody, because it is a national interest. This is not for just ICAT or LDRA for instance. Each one, in fact, in the beginning we made a statement that it's a national interest. Ma'am has mentioned it's a national interest, and there were some questions very specific to how this shift is going to happen in Indian context, how that is going to happen in the global context. Because based on that, you can take a decision. To be frank, globally, this is going to be mandatory. The UN cybersecurity guidelines is already announced. And you want to be a part on the global supply chain, the products need to be qualifying as per those guidelines. Otherwise, you will be out of the supply chain very soon. Why the security is getting pushed is it's a national security subject in every country. If your connected cars are not secure, it can be misused as a terror weapon going forward. So we want to prevent that. Every country will be pushing to get that level first. Safety, globally, it is an acceptable mandate already. In India, probably it will take some more time. According to me, security might take a precedence over safety. But the safety culture is also picking up. One of my customers, I don't want to mention, I don't want to promote any of my customers here. One of the customers you can see in social media, they started stressing on safety, 5-star rated cars. What has happened? Within 1 year, their sales went up by 125%. So there is a shift towards customer buying behavior towards safe cars. It is happening in India. Naturally, the regulatory framework also will pick up. And everything is driven right now in India through the highest standards. The Bureau of Indian Standards is the apex standard body. Because I'm just consolidating some of these questions that has come up in the chat room. BIS is the authority when it comes to national standard building. We have a transport engineering department. There's a committee called TD28. where these issues comes up for discussion. And in the month of December, I was asked to give a presentation to the committee on way forward, what is that as a country we should do. So we have a P11, there's a subcommittee on functional safety and security. So there's work already started. Maybe in Indian context, it will take some time, but it will come. But as you are part of the global supply chain, anyone who is exporting is going to be immediately affected by these regulations kicking in global market. And slowly you will see that coming up in Indian context, because Indian car manufacturers are taking a lead in safety game. That will trigger the foreign OEMs also to follow. There is a general perception that foreign cars are more safe. It's the other way. It's proving in the Indian context. So this will set the ball game in the right direction. You see the recent launches of some of the cars. They're all loaded with electronics and software. And more you're going to see that trend. What does it mean for a professional who is listening to me? What does it mean for a company which is operating in this space? There are two challenges. One is for senior management folks who are listening to me. Please understand this shift. The shift towards the electronics, and I call it software-defined car. A software-defined car. That's what is happening. So if we don't understand the shift in business side, we'll be cut off in the industry. So let us not happen that, because you would have noticed that even with IT slowdown, it is the automotive electronics, automotive sector exports that is actually beating the export trend right now. Even the IT sector was started slowing down. Last couple of years, you can see the automotive electronics is picking up. So we have a responsibility to keep up that momentum. If you want to keep up that momentum, was happening in this space where the automotive electronics is the one which is going to take the gear next. So we also have a national interest, we have a job interest, because this is where actually maximum jobs are getting produced, right? So automotive industry is one of the, unlike typical IT industry, this industry produces a lot of blue collar jobs, which is also a need of the hour. So I would say it is a national interest, it is a jobs interest, it is a skill interest for every professional who is listening to us. Look at this as an opportunity to upgrade your skills, and so that you could start off with something. There are a lot of international certifications available on functional safety and security today, believe me guys, but then many of them are costing lakhs. In India, can we afford everybody paying those lakhs and undergo this kind of basic, even to learn basics? Should we pay lakhs? No, I don't think it is acceptable in Indian context. So this ICAT Aspire is a forum where we are trying to make affordable learning for the masses. It could be academia, it could be industry people. So this is only just a beginning. We will be getting a mailer from ICAT. Joshi Saab, has he logged in by any chance? Sonia, you could join? Maybe Joshi sir, maybe you could add.
Yes. Good afternoon. I'm there, Mr. Joseph. I'm there already. Hello.
Yeah, you could add.
Am I audible?
Cool, sir.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and for a very nice explanation, Shintoji. And first of all, I would like to thank all the attendees, speakers, and our partners, LDRA, ANSYS, and also SAE/NIS for helping us to organize this such an important seminar. Now, since Mr. Joseph has already set up a lot of background, I would just like to speak very little about it. Importance of this particular topic, whether it is safety, security, is very well known to us. And after this webinar, maybe a lot of understandings might have further developed. But one thing which I want to speak my mind is that I had been, associated with Mr. Joseph for quite some time. We have been doing a lot of interactions, we had tried to organize a couple of events in the past where we try to, build awareness about these topics. Of late we have understood that, the industry in India would definitely need more in terms of awareness and more in terms of building capability, as well as knowing the subject in a very big way and a good way. So what we feel is that to start building this kind of forum to create awareness, and parallelly we are also working in TED28, as Mr. Joseph has mentioned already, to create a to draft a Indian standard which could be drawn parallel to whatever international regulations and international norms are available to us, be it cyber security or functional safety. So we are trying to build the fundamental pillars for this in terms of standardization, in terms of awareness and skill development. We would need support from industry who could be attending these kind of events, and in a big way that will encourage us to have many such events and many such courses initially to start with, and to gauge the readiness of industry to participate in these courses. We have launched a 1-month certification course for both cybersecurity as well as functional safety, which will start in August and September respectively, initially kept for a limited period of 1 month. But we have very, very big long-term plans. We are trying to associate with some educational institute to bring it under the umbrella of a proper course, where we can award starting with certificates and reaching up to degree levels. So whatever it takes us to bring these topics to that level, we will try our best. But what we need is that we need support from industry and all the stakeholders who should be quite enthusiastic in participating and making this effort successful, because this will be a national need, as Mr. Joseph has already explained. In times to come, it will become kind of a very fundamental thing like ISO 9001 or ISO TS. So in anticipation of this, we are taking these baby steps, and as Aspire portal has been launched by ICAT, so this skill development initiative is being already headed by Mr. Joseph. So we are trying to work together with all the possible people who can share the knowledge, and that knowledge comes for a very nominal cost, and here cost is not at all a priority. The priority is to become successful in this effort of having experts in India who can handle this subject in a very good way. So with these words, I would like to thank everyone who has participated, all the speakers, all the partners, and all the associates and the members from ICAT team who has been quite untiringly working to make this event successful, because it took a bit of effort to start this first one. And I hope we will have series of these kind of events, as well as launching these advanced courses also in this domain. Thank you so much, and all the best.
Thank you, Madhusudan. I just want to take a minute. I just want to take a minute. There were many new attendees who attended. All I will say is that there's a handout given in your registration link. Please download those. It has my contact details. It has the membership benefits on which I talked about in the beginning. And if there's any query or any requirement, kindly contact me there. Just download that handout. It gives you the membership benefits.
Yep.
Thank you.
So as Madhusudan sir already mentioned, that it's just a beginning. We will have a series of programs, so please reach out to us. If your feedback matters, you can reach me directly, or I'm available in LinkedIn, connected with a lot of people. We need feedback. What else we can do? This is only a beginning. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to share that under Aspire, we are creating Innovation Academy, which has a purpose of undermining what are the skill gaps and create specific targeted courses in that. So we are in the process of finalizing the architecture of that academy. There will be certain part which will be virtual, certain physical. So the training programs and skilling that is being talked about today is a good subject and topic wherein we can bring in all stakeholders and create a course which is unique and which is value to the industry and the customer. Thank you. That's what I wanted to share. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. I once again thank Mr. Shinto, Mr. Raghavendra Bhatt, and Mr. Deepu Chandran for gracing the webinar with their presence and insightful presentations. Due to time constraints, we were not able to take more questions. All are requested to kindly mail us your queries and email ID is mentioned in the chat box. I will get back to you with the reply from the experts. Thank you all the delegates and attendees for your attention and active participation in the webinar. I hope you all found the webinar informative and useful. Thank you everyone. Have a nice day. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you once again on behalf of ICAT. Thank you for being there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir, for supporting us, Madam and Madhusudan and Mr.
Thank
Shinto.
you. Thank you so much.
Nice working
Thank
with you,
you
sir.
all.
Bye.
Bye.